Hi guys, it's Ankita. Welcome to Enchanted Bookends. In this video, I'm going to talk about the second part of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. So if you haven't read the second part yet, you will find spoilers in this video. So this might be the point where you want to decide whether you want to continue watching this video or I want to check out some of my other videos. A lot happens in part 2, so I'm not going to go over each and everything that happens, but I do want to talk about a few things that stood out to me as we go on learning more about Raskolnikov. The first two chapters in this book, in this part 2, gave me a headache because Raskolnikov is running a fever and a madman, an insane man who is ill, is exponentially insane now, and it was extremely difficult to follow his erratic behavior, his conflicting emotions all the time. Anyway, in the first chapter, we see that he comes back to his apartment and he is summoned at the bureau, which I guess is the police station, and he's like, oh, I must go. And all this time Nastasia is like, but you're running a fever, you're unwell, maybe you shouldn't go. But Raskolnikov is, no, I must go. And he's already late, so he arrives at the police station, and then we are introduced to a bunch of interesting characters. The clerk, the very angry Ilya Petrovich, who is the lieutenant. I think Raskolnikov nicknames him as Lieutenant Gunpowder or something. I thought that was hilarious. What a very apt name for the guy. And then we meet the superintendent, who seems like a more rational guy. His name is Nikodem Fomich. I looked up a lot of names. There are a few that I couldn't find, but I looked up most of the names. So hopefully I'm gonna pronounce them correctly in this video. Anyway, Nikodem Fomich. So yeah, he meets all of these guys, and there we see a side of Raskolnikov where he's like, don't shout at me, I am a student, an ex-student. And it almost seems like in this, I don't know, maybe during that time in Russia, being a student itself was a prestigious thing. And again, in this chapter, we see Raskolnikov go through a bunch of emotions, like it's a roller coaster. Anyway, there he learns, and we learn as well, that the police are investigating the crime, murder of the old lady. And Raskolnikov is like, okay, they're doing that, and a terror seizes him and he is absolutely scared. He goes back to his little apartment. In chapter 2, we see that he is now fumbling and trying to think about what to do with the purse full of jewelry that he stole from Alyona. And I was really horrified, not even horrified, I was kind of shocked, a little bit surprised when he is walking on the bank of the river, or is it a canal? I think it's Neva. Is Neva a river? Well, anyway, the water body, and he is thinking of throwing the purse in there. And I'm like, really? And I was confused because I didn't understand the motive of killing the old lady. Like, so-and-so is the reason why he wants to kill the old lady. We're never told that. So I'm like, okay, why did you commit the murder then if you didn't want any money? And then Raskolnikov reproaches himself for, even thinking about throwing the purse away. And he puts all the blame on his illness, whatever's going on with him. I don't know if it's like a viral infection or it's just the entire crime has made him sick. I have no idea what's going on with him. Okay, anyway, then we see him stash away the jewelry at some place, and he goes back to his apartment, and he again has a dream. I know they use the word dream in this translation, but all of these, and I don't know if it's intentional, if Dostoevsky also in his original, in Russian language, uses the word dream instead of nightmare, and if that has certain significance, because the previous dream was also not a dream, it was really a nightmare which contained a lot of animal brutality. That was a nightmare, and this is also called a nightmare, but a dream, but it's really a nightmare where Ilya Petrovich is hitting his landlady or something. Anyway, it turned out to be again a nightmare. And also it seems like Raskolnikov really wants to flee. He wants to go and rent a new place, but he doesn't do any of those things, and instead he falls asleep, probably because he's ill. And when he wakes up, oh, hold on. In the second chapter, he also ends up at his friend Razumikin's place, and the way he treats his friend is absolutely, it's so insulting and very rude. But Razumikin is such a great, lovely guy who is also very poor, but he has found some work, right, to translate some text. And even though he's making very little money from it, he's like, you know, Raskolnikov, you need something. You know, you are not doing well. I can see that you're not doing well. You need some work. So here, I will give you half of the work or a little bit of work and you can make some money. But Raskolnikov is very rude. He's like, no thanks, man. Don't need your pity. I don't need any work. I don't need anything. He basically wants to isolate himself. He doesn't want to interact with anyone. And there's another incident which has again to do with money, and I bring it up because again and again throughout this part 2 we see how Raskolnikov, when he gets money, he is almost like he's not grateful for it, because when he gets hit by a carriage, the lady thinks that he is probably a beggar, and she gives him some money, a coin, and what does he do? He throws it. It makes him so angry. He throws it away, again in a river or someplace. He throws it away. He's like, don't need it. I don't need it. And then he goes back to his apartment, falls asleep, wakes up after many hours, or is it days? Anyway, he wakes up after quite some time, and a lot has happened in that time. Razumikin, even though he was very angry at his friend Raskolnikov, he follows him, and then he finds that his friend is really ill, so he takes care of Raskolnikov, and a bunch of things happen. I don't know what he did, but like what happened between him and the landlady, but it seems like the landlady is no longer going to bother Raskolnikov. Oh, we also get Raskolnikov's real backstory, right? That he had promised to marry the landlady's daughter, but the daughter passes away. Yeah. And he also says that he wasn't really in love with the woman. So it's not like he's really heartbroken. But he does take a lot of credit from the landlady. And that's why the landlady now serves him an exaction note. So Razumikin has taken care of that. Turns out Razumikin also makes friends with the clerk at the police station. What's his name? His name starts with Z. Mr. Zamyotov. Yeah, it turns out he has made friends with him, and he finds him to be a good fellow. Razumikin finds Zamyotov to be a good fellow, which I think Raskolnikov doesn't agree with. Anyway, all the time Raskolnikov is so rude and kind of dismissive of all the help that Razumikin is providing to him. And Razumikin is so tender with him, and so kind to him. He feeds him tea and soup, and we are told that Raskolnikov actually had the strength to feed himself. But this line here on page 148 of this edition. But the workings of some strange, almost animal cunning suddenly prompted him to conceal his strength until the right moment, to lie low, pretend to be not yet quite conscious, if need be, all the while listening and pricking up his ears to find out what was going on. And he does find out a lot of things, right? He finds out that an investigation is full on in progress. We find out that a guy named Porfiry, who's the head of the criminal investigation, they find these two guys, the decorators, Nikolai and Mitya, and yeah, Nikolai, poor guy, is blamed for the murder, and he almost kills himself because he thinks that all the evidence points at him, but thankfully it's not. And I love Razumikin. Razumikin, I think, is a very intelligent guy. He puts everything together, and he's like, whoever I know exactly what happened. And he puts the scene together and he says, oh, the murderer first went here, then there. And he puts all of the puzzle together. All he doesn't know is who the murderer is. And then we see this Dr. Raskolnikov's apartment, and again they start talking about this investigation. And while they're discussing everything, Razumkin is listening, but he doesn't really react to anything. But whenever they talk about the murder, he does perk up, and Zosimov notices this, and Zosimov really cannot find out what else is wrong with Raskolnikov. So it seems like his fever and his like condition and his delirium is the result of the crime that he has committed, or also probably because he's clinically depressed, I think. And then in chapter 5 comes this guy who we were kind of indirectly introduced to through Raskolnikov's mother's letter. We learn about this guy, Pyotr Lysin. And this guy is really smart. He's like a smart looking guy. He's well dressed. He seems to have good manners. He very politely introduces himself to Raskolnikov, but Raskolnikov is absolutely rude to him. Not only him, but Razumkin, for some reason, it also continuously insults the fiance. And at one point, Raskolnikov just loses it and he's like, is it you who, he says that on page 183, he says, is it true? Raskolnikov interrupted again in a voice that trembled with malevolent hostility, betraying a kind of pleasure in being offensive. Is it true that you told your fiancée at the very moment you received her consent that what appealed to you most about her was the fact that she is destitute? Because a man does better to take a wife from a poor background so he can have mastery over her later on and be able to wield a constant reproach over her that he's done her a favor. Yeah, so he confronts him, and we learn that probably that is not what he said and his words were twisted. And that makes me wonder, so does his mother also have some issues, or did she like totally manipulate Raskolnikov? I don't know who to believe at this point, to be honest. But I really liked Pyotr Lysin. He tries his best to kind of impress everyone. Seems like he is very attuned to all the going-ons, all of the new ideas that are circulating in the St. Petersburg society, and he's very well aware. At one point, he talks about the rise of crime and all the crimes that are taking place, and Raskolnikov says something very horrifying. Well, if you take those ideas you were advocating just now to their ultimate conclusion, the end result would be that it's all right to go around killing people. And Lysin is like totally shocked. No, I don't mean it's all right to go around killing people. It's like, for goodness sake. And Zosima was like, nope, that's not right. Yeah, that's all. That was on page 183. Anyway, when everyone leaves, Raskolnikov suddenly feels perfectly well. At some point, he actually contemplates on just ending all of this, making a confession. And it's like on page 187, he says, all this must be brought to an end today, in one go, right now. Otherwise, I can't go home because I don't want to go on living like this. So it's very clear that at this point that maybe he is just very sick of what he has done, like physically sick. And now that he has a little bit of money, he goes around giving money to these women, right? One is a singer, the other one is, I think, a prostitute. But yeah, he is not tight-fisted. Despite of being poor, he easily gives away money to these people. And I think if you observe Raskolnikov's attitude, his attitude towards poor people is usually nice, and he's quite kind to them. If not like polite, he wants to help them. But then if you look at his attitude towards the clerk, who is very polished, wears good clothing, has a good job, has good position, he feels a certain sort of anger towards the clerk, right? He possibly felt the same sort of anger towards he has that repulsion towards the old lady as well, towards Eliona, when he the very first time he meets her, when he goes to pawn something for the very first time. Even in his nightmare, he feels really bad for the animal, but he didn't really feel any guilt over killing the old lady. Then he goes and meets Mr. Zamyotov, and the cunning way he confesses to Zamyotov, you know, if it was me, I would not have spent all the money right away, is what he says. He's like, nope, I will hold on to money for a few years, hold on to the jewelry that was stolen. And Zamyotov is shocked at first, and then he is like, this cannot be true. This is definitely not true. But we learn from Razumikhin later that this actually, you know, that Zamyotov is actually shaken by this confession. Like, Raskolnikov doesn't say this is what I have done, but he's like, this is what I would have done. And he also criticizes the other criminals, right? So he has a certain arrogance to him, like, no, I could have done better. But at the same time, he doesn't really like all these little things that are indirectly pointed out to him, like how he totally missed out on the cash that was in the upper drawer of the chests, and he instead went for the jewelry. Obviously, this is told indirectly to him because nobody knows he's the murderer yet. And we see during this time how he finds it very amusing to rile up Zamyotov, to play with Zamyotov's feelings. And at this point, I truly like got an insight into his criminal mind, of how criminals like to play this game of cat and mouse with the investigators, with the detectives, and they find certain sort of satisfaction and amusement in doing that. And we see that, we see that. Yeah, and after he bids goodbye to Zamyotov, it's like on page 200, the author says, he went out trembling all over with a kind of wild hysteria, in which there was at the same time an element of unendurable pleasure. He was, however, morose and horribly tired. Yeah, we see this like fluctuation, right? Either he is like totally energetic, or he is like flat out tired and miserable. And then Razumikhin wouldn't leave him alone, and Raskolnikov makes a very perfect observation of Razumikhin. It's like, you know, Mr. Razumikhin, I do believe you'll let a man beat you up just for the satisfaction of doing him a favor. If I was Razumikhin, I would have been so insulted by now. I wouldn't go anywhere near Raskolnikov. And then a series of really horrifying things happen. And he's standing on a bridge, and a woman next to him jumps off of the bridge into the water. And Raskolnikov looks at everything with a certain sort of indifference. And then again, we see that side of Raskolnikov where he is really, really kind to poor people, to certain people. And then he finds his friend Marmeladov has been run over by this carriage. He declares, yeah, this is my friend, and let's take him to his wife. And yeah, the entire scene was really sad. Again, I felt so very bad for the little children. Okay, there's one very creepy part in this, and I don't know if it's the translation, or maybe it is a translation, but with Raskolnikov, we never know. When Marmeladov's little daughter runs over to him, he's like, do you love your sister Sonia? And she's like, Polenka. Polenka says that, I love her more than anyone else. This is on page 225, by the way. And he says, and will you love me too? If you have read the Russian translation, please let me know if this was meant to be creepy, or is it just the translation that makes it sound creepy. Anyway, we see that Raskolnikov's really, really kind to the family, and he decides to pay for the funeral. And when he returns home, he finds his mother and sister. And then I think the full weight of what he has done and how his sister and mother, his family, is going to suffer, I think it sinks in, and he collapses. He faints. He's unconscious. We don't know what's going to happen next. I know what's going to happen next. There's going to be a full-blown investigation, and I don't have any sympathy for this guy. I want him to be caught. I don't know. Is there going to be a trial? I don't know. what is going to happen next, I have no idea. But I think there's a lot of suffering for everyone who is related to him in any way. Let me know in the comments down below. So far, what are your thoughts on Raskolnikov? If you made it so far in this video, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye bye.